A reading from the Gospel according to St. John. On the third day there was a wedding at Cana in Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. Jesus also was invited to the wedding with his disciples. When the wine ran out, the mother of Jesus said to him, "They have no wine." And Jesus said to her, "Woman, what does this have to do with me? My hour has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Now there were 6 stone water jars there for the Jewish rites of purification, each holding 20 or 30 gallons. Jesus said to the servants, "Fill the jars with water," and they filled them up to the brim. And he said to them, "Now draw some out and take it to the master of the feast." So they took it. When the master of the feast tasted the water, now become wine, and did not know what had come, though the servants who had drawn the water knew, the master of the feast called the bridegroom and said to him, "Everyone serves good wine first, and when people have drunk freely, then the poor wine. But you have kept the good wine until now." This is the first of his signs Jesus did at Cana in Galilee, and manifested his glory, and the disciples believed in him. After this he went down to Capernaum with his mother, his brothers, and his disciples, and they stayed there for a few days. If we visit any of the great art galleries and look at the stained glass windows in our old cathedrals, we see Jesus depicted either as a tiny baby, safe in his mother's arms, where the emphasis is more often than not on his mother, or the suffering Jesus hanging on a cross. There are no pictures of Jesus' daily life. The Gospels tell us virtually nothing about his boyhood or his days as a young family man. We know that he came down to earth to take on a human body, was subjected to the normal daily activities which we all face. He must have shown great empathy with those who he met, and I am sure that in his family life and his life outside his family, during his ministry, there must have been many moments of joy and laughter. It's only the most miserable, introverted person who does not enjoy a party, and Jesus was certainly not such a person. The party is where you meet new people, form new relationships. Weddings are where 2 families come together and in some cultures meet for the first time. Gone are the days when after a simple church service and a pleasant drink and a few nibbles with family and friends, the happy couple were able to escape and have some quality time to themselves. Today it's an expensive, long drawn-out affair. Our reading from John's Gospel today is about a wedding. We're given a very simple picture of a Jewish wedding in a small village. No doubt the need to plan and spend money was just as important then as it is now, the only difference being the lack of sophisticated facilities. A Jewish wedding did go on for about a full week, and was probably the only time of real pleasure that the young couple would have in their whole lives. It probably started in the evening. There are a couple of aspects of this story which need consideration. Some of the writings, which are not included in the New Testament, suggest that it was a family affair, the bride being Jesus' cousin and the groom John himself. We don't know, and it doesn't matter, but if this was the case, Mary, Jesus' mother, probably had a hand in making the preparations. If Jesus brought with him some of his friends who he had just called to join him, this may have been a sufficiently large extra number of guests to upset the balance of food and drink. Hence Mary's concern to get things right. Wine was an essential at any Jewish wedding, although drunkenness was the height of bad manners. I always wonder at the translation which we read in the Authorized Version of the Bible. Jesus sounds so rude to his mother after the wine had run out when he says, "Woman, what have I to do with you?" That cannot have been the way Jesus really spoke. He had lived within his family for 30 years, lived with them and loved them. The Greek word for woman is the same word that Jesus used when he was on the cross, asking his beloved John to look after his mother. Jesus was a gentleman. I think the way he spoke would have been much softer, much gentler. Probably it would have been more like, "Mum, what would you like me to do?" We are told that the water pots, everyday pots, nothing special, which were there to provide water to wash feet and hands, or any other jobs, were filled to the top, and at Jesus' instigation were turned from water into wine. John's Gospel is very carefully constructed. He never includes anything which has no significance. It's like an onion, with numerous layers of truths hidden one beneath the next. He was writing for both the Jews and the Greek people. John felt it was necessary to put his story across in a way which would be easy for the Jews to understand, for them to see the everyday things with which they were familiar. But the Greeks had analytical minds and would want to look deeper into what was being written. This is a side of the story which is far greater relevance to us than just the simple idea of water being turned into wine. We can see that Jesus was a social person, otherwise he would have not been at the wedding. We must assume that he was a fun person, otherwise he would not have been invited in the first place. We know that he was the Son of God, a spiritual person who was in a human frame. And the underlying side of this story is the spiritual tale. I think we need to look at this story allegorically. This would probably have been understood by both Jew and Greek. Firstly, it's symbolic that this story is set in a wedding, a time when human love is the main emotion. The Jews were fully conscious of sin and familiar with the Old Testament, when Adam and Eve were sinful when they ate of the tree of knowledge, and that people were sinful from that time onwards. They would also have been familiar with the writings of the prophets, who were promising that God would give them a land flowing with wine. The water made wine was far in excess of anything needed for the wedding. Here, the symbolism is that there is so much love coming from God, love in such quality that there is enough for everybody. The Jews would have been able to understand this. Another theologian suggested that the Pharisees had made worship so complicated that it was beyond the ability for the ordinary people, and they were moving away from religion, becoming secular. The quality of the new wine was to demonstrate the difference that God's love could make. The Greeks also had stories about excess of wine, which were an essential part of the worship of their numerous gods. Gods which Christianity was showing to the Greeks were false and could do nothing for their worshippers. What in essence John is saying to the Greeks is that in the past they were looking for someone who would make their lives happier, but so far there was nothing but failure. Here was someone, in the person of Jesus Christ, who could fill their lives and bring to fruition all that they had longed for. To the Jews, John is saying that Jesus has come to turn the imperfection of the law into the perfection of grace. To the Greek, he is saying that Jesus has come really and truly do the same things that they only dreamed their false gods could do. And John is still telling us truths. He's telling us that this story, as so many other stories in the Gospels, are not things that happened once and have no relevance outside that context. He's telling us that what Jesus did that day, He's still doing for us every day. It was not a one-off that Jesus turned some water into wine to solve the problems of a party, but He wants us to see that whenever Jesus comes into our lives, there comes a new quality, which is like turning water into very good wine. Life without the love of God in our hearts is dull and flat. But when God's love through Jesus comes into it, life becomes vivid and sparkling and exciting. To go back to the Gospel reading, John wrote his Gospel some 70 years after Jesus' crucifixion and resurrection, and over the years he would have had time to ponder on what he had seen and understand the significance of Jesus' teaching. What John is saying to us is that wherever Jesus went and whatever he did was like turning water into wine. If you want a new lift in your life, follow Jesus, and your life will be transformed. And the more that we relate to God's love, the greater that transformation will be. That is the great gift from God, which is there for us all, today and always. Amen.